Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, your Swansea City podcast. I'm your host, Steve Carroll. We have a returning guest this week, one who's not been with us for a while, but it's great to say that Ian Mitchelmore has is back with us this week. So, afternoon, Ian. Thanks for coming on.
Good afternoon, Steve. Yeah, it's been a while, mate. So nice to be back on. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, oh, it's a pleasure as always. Obviously, the reason we haven't had you on so much is because you were not really covering the Swans so much anymore. You've gone up north, but you were at the race course on Friday, weren't you? So that's why we're able to have a little bit of a chat again. But yeah, it was an anticipated night really, with Wrexham certainly wanting some revenge over the Swans, and the Swans potentially looking to try and close up on the playoff places, but. Unfortunately, the bragging rights went to North Wales, didn't they?
Yeah, it felt like a make or break night as far as the Swans were concerned. I thought, didn't it, Steve? With the gap that was there and this big cluster of teams. Just before we started recording, we were talking about Southampton. Being a strong fit for maybe challenging Wrexham. Derby are in the mix as well. So it felt like if the Swans did get a win, then they could keep themselves in the hunt. But yeah, I think it's probably done and dusted now. And 8 games to go. It's all about trying to build for next season. You'd think, which to think where they were when Vitor Matos came in, fluent with relegation. I mean, it shows that how big an impact he's had since he's come in. So yeah, it was nice to watch the Swans look a little bit stronger, a bit more familiar with what probably the fans, I would imagine, want to see compared to where they were at the start of the season under Alan Sheehan. Obviously there was a lot of possession, a lot of control, getting into the final third, but couldn't quite turn that into clear-cut chances, apart from that one for Vipotnik in the first half. But yeah, I think despite the defeat, it was probably a disappointing one, a little bit frustrating, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it kind of just shows Swans just need a little bit more time, a couple more players in the window, and build around those key players like Vipotnik, like Ethan Galbraith, Gonçalo Franco perhaps as well. So yeah, it's a work in progress, but it's definitely on the up, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. Of course, it was disappointing the other day, but you're right really to mention that when Matos come in, things were very different. To even be having a playoff chat is was crazy, really. So that obviously has been put to bed now, which is a shame. But at the same time, does give us a chance to look towards next season, really. But I mean, looking at the game generally, I think, as you say, we had a lot of the ball, but didn't really hurt the opposition, which is quite frustrating, really. I'd rather that than have none of it and get away with a lucky point on occasions, because I just feel like there's no sustainability with that. Although in the short term we've got something, but I mean, we could have gone in front in the first minute. Really, Franco was in, wasn't he? He could have passed it to Vipotnik, and as you say, Franco, to be fair, later on in the half made a great ball for Vipotnik. On this occasion, the shot was saved. A lot other than that, though, the game was played a lot in Wrexham's third without it. I felt we were waiting really for a final ball or a little bit of magic from someone to make it happen. But unfortunately, other than those two opportunities, really, I don't feel as if their goalkeeper was really tested, which is a bit frustrating.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, those two chances you mentioned in the first half, especially the Vipotnik one, you'd have put your money on him scoring from there. Credit to Arthur Okonkwo, it's a really good save, but it wasn't the best finish from Vipotnik, was it? Which you wouldn't expect given how brilliant he's been and how clinical he's been from, the few chances or clear chances he's had is massively outperforming his XG. It's unbelievable. So credit to him. But yeah, like you say, they just couldn't get that. I think if they got that first goal, I'd have backed them to have gone on to win, especially the way they were playing and the control they had against. Were missing a couple of players, and I think they finished the game with about 34% possession. Was it Wrexham? But credit to them, they were clinical, they were effective at what they do, and they defended on the whole really really well. So that's the type of thing that the Swans are going to need to get used to going forward under Matos. If they are going to dominate games and certain times coming up against low blocks, they need to find solutions to that. And I think a part of it's going to be the wingers. I think Swansea fans have probably been banging their heads a little bit with the wingers over the last year or so. I mean, I actually thought Ronaldo started the game quite well against George Thomason, who, in fairness to him, he's a central midfielder playing left wing back, but he got a lot of joy. But that end product's just it's criminally lacking, isn't it, Steve? I think they need upgrades on the wings certainly, but that would be a big help. Galbraith being back in the middle, I think, is a big plus, and Josh Key looks like I don't know if he's back to his best, but he's certainly getting there again after a sticky first half of the season. So credit to Matos and the coaching staff. It looks like they've managed him quite well in terms of taking him out and drip feeding him back in. So again, yeah, it was just a lack of ruthless instinct in the final third. I think in some ways it reminded me not quite the same, but a little bit of the time under Russell Martin, where they would have a lot of domination control, but didn't always turn it into chances. But yeah, it felt like a bit of a one-off because fair play to the Swans, they have been scoring a lot of goals under Matos, haven't they, Steve?
Yeah, our record isn't too bad with scoring. I think creating wise at times isn't always brilliant. We've been good at scoring from set pieces, really, which is not like us, but at the same
Mm.
time, we'll take it. I mean, to be honest, I felt the first half was more of an unusual Swansea performance from recent times. I can't really remember us dominating a game so much in terms of possession, particularly away from home. And ironically, a mate of mine messaged me literally just before they scored, saying about how well we were playing, and which is always obviously the kiss of death. But it was true at that point. We were playing really well, and I felt encouraged. But goals can change games, can't they? And obviously, we've given away a soft one, and it did turn the game, really, didn't it? The Swans never really threatened a lot after that, did they? Unfortunately.
No, exactly, and that's where Wrexham, particularly at home, they have been good when they get that first goal. They can defend really well. It was a brilliant bit of skill from Nathan Broadhead. Credit to him. Cameron Burgess, he just got turned maybe a bit too easy. I don't know. Am I giving not giving Broadhead enough credit there, or am I being a bit too harsh on Burgess? I'm not sure. Maybe it's a bit of the both, but it was a lovely finish from him. Vigouroux obviously got a strong hand to it, but not quite strong enough. And yeah, like you say, it just felt decisive, especially after missing that chance through Rapotnik not too long before. And it just made it put the emphasis on the Swans to break Wrexham down. And Phil Parkinson, I think he was more than happy to say, well, we know they're going to have the ball, we know they can control it, but we can keep them on the edge of our own third and force them to break us down, whether it's be putting crosses in wide or playing through the middle. And they just couldn't do it in the end, could they? I think was it Marko Stamenic had the shot in the second half from sort of just outside the box, and it was a good save from Okonkwo, but it was never one that really you thought it's a brilliant chance that they've created. So it kind of typified how much of a slog the second half was, which, like you say, as a Swans fan for yourself, it would have been disappointing given how much control and how much possession you had.
Yeah, I think I could sense we weren't really going to score. It just felt like that, really. I mean, the Staminit's chance. I mean, if it goes in, it would have been a brilliant goal, really. But it wasn't so much a well worked move as it would have just been a brilliant finish from on the edge of the box. So it
Mm.
was disappointing. I do think there were positives in terms of that we were able to impose ourselves more away from home because it's been a big problem for the Swans generally this season. I mean, a lot of defeats. Obviously, a good result at Portsmouth. Last midweek, so that was a bit of progress. But I think generally we away is what has held us back, particularly under Matos. So I can see that there being positives there, but I think I do wonder a bit with Wrexham. They've won a lot of games over the last few years. There must be that like know-how to make sure once you're in a position to try and see it out. And I felt that was what they were quite good at. For all our possession, they probably didn't feel too concerned, did they? And then the goal at the end with a little bit of a deflection as well sort of summed it up a bit. That just it wasn't our night, and yeah, we were going to lose to them for the first time in a good while, which is disappointing. But as you say, I think we can take some positives from it, but naturally it is disappointing, and I think the Swans have got to face that we're not going to be the highest placed Welsh team this season now, are we?
Mhm. Yeah, it doesn't seem that way, does it? But like I say, I mean, you spoke about Wrexham there. It's a mentality thing. Phil Parkinson's great at that. He's done it in previous clubs. Bradford being a prime example as well. Back in the days when they played the Swans in the League Cup final all them years ago, as you know, you were there, of course, Steve. But it's I do come away from it from a Swans perspective thinking it's a plus point the way they played because you're bearing in mind Matos was it 4 months he's been in now, so since mid to late November, almost exactly 4 months is the time we're recording. And what they've done in that short time, they've made a lot of progress. I personally feel far better than me, Steve, from going to games home and away every week. But um, given where they were and the style and the lack of attacking threat and everything under Sheehan, it was probably a little bit disheartening to watch, and you didn't see a forward plan of where are we going with this in the long term. Whereas now, it's early days, but at least you can see a plan of okay, I know where we're going now. So if you can tweak the squad and add a little bit more quality here and there, you'd like to think that'll only get better, and of course, do it over a course of a season, and then suddenly you will be, well, I can't even call it top six challenges. It's top eight next season, isn't it? So, there's another potential plus point for the Swans as well. So I do come away from it. Yeah, obviously it was a disappointing result, and not to score would have been a frustration for the Swans. But I wouldn't be too disheartened in the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Really, is that progress has been made, and yeah, obviously there'll need to be a few changes in the summer, and some of the changes will likely be ones maybe that we don't want. I mean, when you've got the championship's top goal scorer, for example, then you always know there's going to be interest in him. So there is going to be changes to come, I would think. Some for the better, some maybe not so much. But yeah, as you say, there is a realistic target for us to improve now next season. And as you say, I mean, if the playoffs this year were down to eighth, we'd probably still be in it, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's when you've got clubs like, oh yeah, I was at Wrexham, Watford last night, and Watford beating Wrexham, it's kept them in the hunt. Like I said, I mentioned Southampton, I mentioned Derby. You'd probably go a little bit below that. You say you've got the Swans, Sheffield United had a spell, but there's a few clubs there where it's probably a bit too much now. But next season they would still be in the mix with 8 games or 9 games to go, depending on how many they got left. So it is going to be interesting. It kind of waters it down a little bit, but you look at clubs like, I think Preston are probably a prime example. They've been in this league for about a decade or so now. Obviously, they did go down to League One briefly, didn't they? But they seem to have been a club that just can't quite get in the playoffs. And Stoke obviously came down with the Swans. They've been the same. So yeah, it'll probably favour that cluster of teams. You'd imagine Swansea might be in there. I know they've been in the playoffs twice under Steve Cooper previously, but it's a very different outlook at the club and a different squad and everything else now compared to those years, 5, 6 years ago. So it's going to be interesting, isn't it? I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think for the Swans, unfortunately, the season is probably now more about trying to build towards next year. I mean, I'm hoping that maybe some different players get an opportunity, particularly as we get towards the end of the season. I mean, one thing that has been discussed recently was, you mentioned about the wide players and the criminal lack of final ball. Really, I mean, we have discussed briefly previously on this podcast about whether a diamond might suit us better. I mean, you look at this amount of central midfield players that we've got. Obviously, Adam Eder is in the Irish squad, for example, now, so he's close to fitness. You'd have Vipotnik, obviously, Cullen possibly playing up front as well. I mean, that might get more out of what Swansea have got at the moment, don't you think?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, that, because I do like, obviously, Jay Fulton started at Portsmouth, didn't he? And then Stamenic came in for the Wrexham game. So, if you have him sort of maybe deeper, you've got Fulton as a second option or a backup, if you like. Then you've got the likes of Franco, Galbraith, Widdell as well. So there are options there. And then, like you say, obviously Vipotnik, he's one of the first names on the team sheet at the moment. Adam Edith, he can get himself fit. Obviously, see how he goes over the international break, but fingers crossed he'll be back for after the break for the is it Sheffield United game. And it'd be nice to see him just have a little bit of a run, because it's not quite worked out for him since he's joined this season. You got that goal at Charlton. You have those little moments where you think, is this going to be lift off? And it's not quite happened, but maybe a change of shape or something similar could trigger that. And like you say, when the wingers have been a problem, nowhere near enough goals and assists from those from particularly from Ronaldo and Eon as well. I think maybe that is the answer. So is this a bit of an experimentation period? I don't think Vitor Matos will just rip up the rule book and start going crazy and doing some mad things, but he's got options to drip feed a couple of different players in, maybe, and maybe just try little things here and there. So yeah, 8 games to go. It'd be really intriguing to see what he does.
Yeah, I'd like to see a couple of youngsters potentially get a chance. We've got a few good ones that are out on loan that have done great in Scotland, like Philip Lisser and Cameron Congreve. Obviously, they're not going to come back. But I mean, the other thing is you just need to see where we're at for next year. I mean, Leo Walter has come in, obviously wasn't really fully fit because of a Scandinavian playing in a different type of season to us, with it being a summer league. So I'd like to see him get more minutes now, for example, and see what he's got for the rest of the season. But it's the key for Swansea, from my point of view, has definitely got to be trying to find more ways of creating chances. I think that was what was summed up on Friday. But yeah, on this weekend coming now, we Coventry come to town. they're top of the league. They did have a wobble, but they're now in a commanding position again. You would expect them to go up. It's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? I think on Saturday, because you look at Carl Rushworth, Matt Grimes obviously coming back for the first time. You know, the likes of Jake Bidwell and Joe Latibaudiere are there as well, although they're less likely to play. But yeah, it's a bit of a reunion, isn't it, on the weekend? And I think the Swans will want to try and turn over a team that looks like it's destined for the Premier League.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable number of connections there, isn't it? Obviously, Matt Grimes being the prime one, given that he went well, just over a year ago now, wasn't it? But even last season, I was looking at Coventry under Frank Lampard, and I watched them in the playoff semi-finals against Sunderland, and I've got no idea how they didn't win that two-legged tie. I really just cannot believe it. But they've regrouped, they've re-strengthened in the summer, and they've been the best team. Middlesbrough have had some really good spells, and obviously Kim Hellberg, a man who could easily have gone to the Swans had that one panned out. But he's certainly on the radar, wasn't he? But he looks to be doing a really solid job up at Middlesbrough as well. But yeah, I think Coventry have been the standout. Matt Grimes suits what Frank Lampard's doing in the same way that he suited the likes of Graham Potter, Steve Cooper, Russell Martin, particularly as well, the way they played under him. So yeah, that will be an interesting one. I don't envisage he'll get a great reception, but he gave a huge amount to the Swans, and I believe he turned down moves away previously as well. So maybe he will look at it now and think he's justified in leaving. After all those years, was it about a decade or so he was with the Swans, wasn't he, in the end, Steve? So it will be interesting. I've watched them a few times. Obviously, we watched them against Southampton at the weekend, and that was a surprise result. As good as Southampton sort of have been in the last few months, it was still a shock to see them get beat, particularly at home as well. So I think might not be the best time to play them, because I think they'll want to really get a positive result just to stay top and keep everybody in a positive mood ahead of that final chunk of fixtures. So I'm looking forward to the game. It should be two teams with interesting styles. It's the late kickoff, the TV game. Should be a good crowd there as well. Like I say, the last one before the break. So yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it, if I'm honest, Steve.
Yeah, I think it will be an interesting one at the weekend. I'm not at all surprised that Sky have decided to pick it, because you look at it and there's so many games on TV now. You can usually work out what ones you think are more likely to get moved than others, and I'm not shocked that they've gone for this one, particularly with a couple of ex-players and a team at the top of the league. I think if you're a side at the top, you tend to pay the price with not many fixtures. Kicking off at the time that you'd like it to, but it is what it is. I mean, looking at the players that obviously are there now. I mean, Rushworth was brilliant for the Swans, wasn't he? I mean, I think he was always destined for better things. So I could see him being a number one in the Premier League. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Grimes is it's the interesting one. Isn't it? He was always a bit of a marmite down here. I think Grimes probably didn't get the respect he deserved of some people, but I do wonder at times as well whether he could maybe be a little bit safe with his play. And I felt he had more in his locker, but would sometimes more about trying to keep the ball rather than to maybe try and play a more ambitious ball, which he could. He was more than capable of doing at times as well. So, but there was no question in his ability, and the only thing I didn't like about him really was his free kicks. So ironically, now he'll probably score one against us the weekend. That was not his strong point, but I was sorry to see him go, and I do think that well, he'd still get into our team now. There's no doubt in that. So it was, but how it happened was still very strange, wasn't it? I think the full truth of that, we're probably still waiting. We might have to wait until he hangs up his boots for that. But yeah, I mean, Bidwell and Latibaudiere were not anywhere near as popular. I would say they were. Yeah, although I always felt Latibaudiere was certainly not a wing back. He was a backup centre back. So I think by the time he'd left, I was a bit just fed up of Russell Martin playing him in those positions, really, because it just felt like that wasn't him. And Bidwell, I just thought was nothing really better than average, really. But do you have many memories of those players? I suppose Grimes probably more than most.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Joel Latibaudiere. I had a bit of sympathy for him because, like you say, he was playing right wing back a lot, and I think that would have been around the time of, was it Ethan Laird had been in as well, and obviously he had some really good moments, but wasn't quite as consistent as we kind of hoped he would be. But I think when Latibaudiere did play in the back three, he looked far more comfortable. Because 'Cause I think it was, for example, the games at Cardiff, the 4-0 win, and days like that where it was all about possession and control and hooking their players in and everything. Basically the Russell Martin way. I think that's when Latibeaudiere actually looked pretty decent. I think he suited that, but yeah, I think he played far too much at wing back, which was probably more out of necessity and fairness to him. And yeah, I don't, it just didn't really work in the grand scheme of things at Swansea. And then Jake Bidwell, obviously, he was there before that. He was a very much a, I don't want to do him a disservice, but I think steady Eddie is a fair way of putting it. I remember speaking to a journalist. It would have been at Brentford, I think it was, or was it Everton? I can't remember where it was now. When he first joined, and they basically said he's 6 or 7 out of 10 every week. He's never a 10 out of 10, but he's never a 3 out of 10. He's always just solid. And it was that little pass up the byline, first time left-footed cross, curling cross. He's a specialty of his. So yeah, same again with him. Solid championship player again. But you can kind of see, Coventry have evolved a little bit, and you can see why his influence has definitely waned. But a good servant to Swansea nonetheless. So I'm sure if they do get involved, they'll get a decent reception, won't they?
Yeah, you'd think so. It certainly adds a little bit of spice to it, doesn't it? And the Swans are trying to keep their unbeaten home record going under Matos as well. So, but this is probably the biggest challenge that he's faced, isn't it? It's got to be with the being a team that's top of the league, and there's a couple of ones to come as well. So if we remain unbeaten for the rest of the season with Middlesbrough and Southampton still to visit, that would be quite a big achievement, I think, wouldn't it?
Yeah, massively. I mean, I watched a few of the home games on Sky and whatnot, and they just look really positive. And it's ironically the one where, the Snoop Dogg, where there was all fanfare and everything and a massive crowd. Maybe that played a part in them not starting so well because they were poor in the first half against Preston on that night, weren't they? But still deserved something out of the game, which it was good to see Liam Cullen get that goal late on. But that aside, I think it's been excellent. Like you say, we were talking a bit earlier on about the away form being nowhere near good enough, but the home form's just been absolutely unbelievable. So, yeah, like you say, if you get another good crowd a Saturday evening, maybe another couple of hours drinking time for the fans, maybe they'll be able to make a bit more noise and enjoy it a bit more. But it's a good test. This is what you need at this stage of the season, where you know, in terms of the playoffs, there's not really much to play for. You'd imagine that was done and dusted now. So it's almost a free hit, isn't it? You want players to play with freedom, and I hope that's the message from Matos. Just show me what you can do, and prove to me you're worth being in my team next season. So hopefully we'll see that not just against Coventry, but in those other big games, like you say, Sheffield United away, Borough, Southampton, QPR trip as well. So yeah, there's 8 more chances to stake a claim for next year. Is how I'd look at it.
Yeah, definitely. There's no doubt in that. Every player should be certainly looking at it from that point of view, really, because there's a few on loan here as well, and you never know if for their careers they need to make sure they're delivering because for whatever they're doing next year, or some of them may be interested potentially in staying here as well. So that adds a little bit to it. But do you think there'll be a similar team to what we saw at Wrexham? I mean, the only place I can think of where we might get a change is potentially out wide. Not a huge amount of options, but it's been a one game week, obviously, without a game since last Friday. So the back four generally picks itself because there aren't many other options. Though obviously Galbraith has played right back, but it looks like that experiment is over. I mean, there are choices in the middle, but I would have thought he would stick with Stamenic, Galbraith, Franco. But I only think the change could come with two of Ronaldo, Yom, and Nunes, and I'd have thought Nunes would be the most likely to drop out, and obviously Potnik will start up front. But yeah, that's why really I've argued for a bit of a diamond because I think it might offer us more of a threat, but it's likely to be sort of similar, you would have thought. And if I'm honest, I think it'll be Nunes that misses out.
Yeah, it could well be. Obviously, he was one of the ones that came in against Wrexham, as was Stamenic. I think it was just them two, wasn't it? The back four, it probably is going to be settled now, especially with Josh Key sort of finding a bit of form. We've already spoke about it. That's given Ethan Galbraith a chance to move back in the middle. Franco, he's another key player. So yeah, I don't see too many changes. Maybe Ronaldo he seems to keep starting, doesn't he? Potentially Eon back in for Gustavo Nunes, but again, that's not a cert, is it? So you'd be surprised if it was more than two. Unless he looks at Liam Cullen, if there is maybe a tweak of shape or anything. But yeah, it probably is on that left hand side of the wing, isn't it? Beyond that, I don't see too much being changed, if I'm honest.
No, you wouldn't have thought so. And generally there are just a lack of options at the back. There really isn't. There's nothing since Casey went back to West Ham. I mean, it's fairly obvious what centre half partnership's going to be. And when you've got the top scorer in the league up front, you're not really going to make a change unless it's a bit of rotation. It's generally, other than in the middle of the park, it does feel as if it's quite stable, really. So I would have thought that would be it. But right, we're just gonna wrap it up here for this week because I think that's all there is to say, really. I think when you get to a stage where you're getting towards the like the end of the season and you're in mid-table, it's it is what it is. But a big thanks to Mitch for joining us. It's been a while, but always a pleasure. And if Wrexham don't go up next year, I'm sure we can get you on again. But a big thanks to you as ever for joining us, and bye for now.